Good morning, Jerry. How are you?
I am well this morning. Thank you so much. And
Well,
yourself?
good. No, good. I'm glad you took time to speak with me today. And I just, the thing is, you and I have known each other for what, 23, 24 years?
A quarter of a century,
Yeah,
just like that.
just like that, and I always thought, you always had these great stories about how you got in the music business, what you were involved with. And I said, it really would be a shame to not get this recorded on video for posterity. And so I appreciate you taking time to chat with me today about this. So, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about just how you got started, how your entry into the music business.
Well, like most things in life, it's a matter of happenstance most of the time. I was a high school kid. Uh, I'll say up front that I was blessed to be kind of bright when I was young, and I skipped a couple of grades in grammar school.
Oh,
So I
okay.
ended up graduating 2 years ahead of time. So I had a head start on things. People, when I talk to people, they'll go, "Wait a minute, the numbers don't add up." I said, "They do. If you graduated from high school, you were 16."
Right.
So I was about 14. I was a junior in high school, and I had a friend named Paul Bondora who had aspirations to be a singer. So he changed his name because nobody would want to listen to anybody like a Tony Bennett or a Frank Sinatra or a
Yeah.
Paul Bondora. So he changed his name to Corey Wade, which
Okay.
I thought, very strange name. And so I got involved with him as a little local garage band, and then he started booking gigs. Next thing I know, I was meeting disc jockeys from, at that time we were living in Chicago, so it was WLS Radio, which was a 50,000 watt powerhouse.
Oh yeah.
You can actually listen to it in Tennessee at night. So, and I met a gentleman named Art Roberts who was the afternoon disc jockey, and he got me involved in doing something kids today don't even know anything about. It's called record hops. He
Okay.
and I would go out with a turntable and a stack of 45 records. And the next thing I know, he's telling me he knows a guy in the music business who owns a record distributor and they need a guy. And I'm fresh out of high school and don't have any aspirations to do anything much. And so I end up as that quote unquote local promotion man. I had my little stack of 45s running around to radio stations wearing my green plaid wool sports jacket and my white
Sure.
socks
Sure, man.
that came about that short of my shoes. And I was hot stuff, baby. And that kind of rocked along for a couple of years. And the interesting thing about a record distributor, distributes records mostly to jukebox operators. And back in those days, if a major label like RCA or Mercury, they would have their own branch offices in all the major cities, but all the other people that you think is being big record companies, but they're really independents, was 20th Century Fox, uh, Dot, ABC, Paramount.
Yeah.
Motown, of all people, was an independent label out of Detroit, Michigan, and they went through independent distributors in every city in the United States that had a record distributor, because the main sale of records back in those days actually wasn't to the public; it was to jukebox operators.
Oh, okay.
So that's what they had, jukebox routes actually, where they would go out and service the jukeboxes and things like that. And I told the story one time. I said, here I was, 16 and a half or 17 years old. And I was sitting in Leonard Chess's office on South Michigan, South State Street.
Yeah.
And Howard Bedno, who was my boss, who was the over assistant promotion man, Leonard said, "Howard, have your boy run out and get the guys a bottle of J&B." And he said, "Well, he's not old enough to do that, Leonard." And he went rummaging through his desk drawer and said, "Here, you're George Kaminsky. You're 21 years old."
Just like that, huh?
Just like that. And I was sitting there because the boys were Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry. And I was sitting there I'm a small town guy from a small town in North Alabama. And I looked around and I went, "Lord, take me now. It can't get any better than this."
That had to be just amazing, just to be in the presence of those two guys and those gentlemen.
Well, there was a movie that came out several years ago called Cadillac Ranch, which was the story of Chess Records. And I highly recommend people go watch it, because it's really one of the movies that, when they actually went back, most of the things that they put in the movie were real,
Yeah.
because that's the way people did business back then. we didn't think anything about it. We were just young people trying to have a good time and get records played on the radio stations and meeting a lot of people. I used to call on a radio station in Chicago. It was WAAF. It was on Wacker Drive. It was a jazz station, and the disc jockeys were all kind of, jazz wasn't the biggest genre in the world for ratings. So most of them had other jobs. One of the guys was a guy named Marty Fay, who was actually a local spokesperson on every commercial you ever saw. But there was a black gentleman who worked the midday shift who kind of took a liking to me, I guess is probably the easiest way to say it. He liked to talk to me. And he asked me to go bowling with him in his bowling league. Yeah. And I said, well, sure, why not? I'll do that because I like to bowl. And so he started telling me stories. And I said, so are you really who they say you are? And he said, yeah, I was the first black guy to ever win a gold medal for these. It was Jesse Owens.
Was it really?
Yeah, people go, yeah, but Jesse Owens was this. And I go, well, yeah, but I used to bowl with him.
See, you've never told me that story.
No. It's a true story. People, Jesse had a reputation for being very militant about racial issues.
Yeah.
If you think about what he went through in 1936, you could probably say, yeah, I understand that. And particularly in the climate that we're in right today, to have somebody who was really so far ahead of his time, and all he wanted to do was make a living and go bowling on Wednesday nights. Yeah. And hang out with this little chunky white kid. So those when I say happenstance, that's kind of the way things happen. I had been working for the record distributor for several years, and it was 1967, I think 66 maybe. They had the grand premiere of a movie called Waterhole Number 3, starring James Coburn, and a guy named Carroll O'Connor, who probably got a TV show at some point in time.
I've heard that name of the
I know. So for those who don't know, it's Archie Bunker.
Archie Bunker, yeah.
Back then he was a character actor, and so this movie came out, and I had left the distributor and gone to work for the local branch of Mercury Records, and they had a branch in Chicago, and I was busy getting records played. And of course, Mercury being a little bit larger and having a few more dollars, the pay was better, and the car got newer, and had a little more class. And I quit wearing white socks with my dress pants, and I had a pretty good reputation in the industry at that point in time locally. Yeah. People would come in from Los Angeles, and the local guy would get to take them around to the radio stations. And, I'd have people like Solomon Burke in the car one day, who was a great blues singer.
Love Solomon, yeah.
Oh, God, it was great. And have people like Herbie Mann. I would go to the London House, which was a local restaurant, great restaurant in Chicago at that time, but they featured jazz. The Arienthal brothers, I believe it was, owned it. So I would get to go and sit at their place and see my acts playing up on stage, because we also had Gene Krupa, which was one of the acts that was in there. Was a great drummer. Oh, yeah. Buddy Rich. Yeah. And that's the kind of acts they played. Herbie Mann was a flautist. Yeah. And quite the ladies' man, by the way. So I hung out with him a lot because I was single. And then we would get to go to places like the up on Rush Street. I said Arienthal, it was Marienthal brothers. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And they would have rock acts. So I got to go see Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders, which was a wonderful kind of a cliquish act. I have an overweight white guy with a pompadour, bleach blonde hair, singing blues.
Now, I've heard he put on quite a show. I mean, he's a real showman.
He wore nothing but silk suits that he would buy from clothing stores that catered to basically to an ethnic customer thing. So they were always skin tight, and they were always soaking wet when he came off stage, because he never stopped. I mean, everything was sticking to him when he finished. He was a great showman. I followed him for years. But so you get to meet a lot of people. You get to know a lot of people. Somewhere in there, I did the all-night, I was an all-night disc jockey for WOPA radio in Oak Park, Illinois, a 5,000 watt FMer, I want you to know.
Oh, wait, are you telling me they give you, a young man, all this responsibility for that much wattage?
Yeah. For that, I mean, we're tearing it up. I think we got out about as big as a paper route, if you want to know the truth. But I got to meet people that were in the blues side of the business, the R&B side of the business, and the Chesses had actually gone out and bought a radio station because they went. Leonard was the brains. His brother was kind of the creative brother, but Leonard was the guy who rolled his shirt sleeves up. And I'm not taking nothing away from Mr. Chess, but he was more of the creative side of it. So Leonard said, "Wait a minute, we got a record company. We need airplay. Let's buy a radio station. Let's put it over on Cicero Avenue. If those are, you know, Chicago, it's 5000 West." And the radio station, conveniently, because it was an AM station and it was only 5,000 watts, and a 5,000 watt radio station is just kind of spotty.
Yeah.
But if you put the tower next to the Chicago River and let some of the grounding cables kind of get down close to the water, you get a massively wonderful signal.
Wow. There's an engineering tip. Yeah.
You don't want to let the FCC find out you're doing it that way. So that was the kind of the circle that I ran in, and never thought anything about it. You know, it was just a way of life.
Hey,
and
Jerry,
then it got. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was going to ask you. Do you feel like that at that time? It sounds like they were a lot more accessible. The people that were in the industry, you know, the executives, and also the artists.
It was nothing for people to just walk into our office and say, "Hi, you know, I'm Roger Miller."
Wow.
I was in town. I wanted to drop by and see how my records are doing.
King of the road, yeah.
Or Frankie Valli would come by the office. But what I kind of skipped over was a guy named Arnie Orleans ran into me and said, "Hey, you want to come to work for us? I heard you do pretty good work, and you'll only have to carry one brand and one label." And so I went to work for Mercury Records, which was at that time, and still is, I guess, was Philips, the label Philips, the label Smash, and the label Mercury. Okay. And they also had a cut rate thing called Fontana. Those were where they tested out. They put them on that label.
Yeah.
So I got to see people like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons roaming through the town to go see the people at the radio stations. And I got called on to meet all these people. So here I go to see Waterhole #3, because that's part of my job duties. And it premiered, the world premiere was at the State Lake Theater. And I came out, and there was a kind of a goofy looking guy standing out there who turned out to be a gentleman named Rory Burke, who was the sales manager for Smash Records. And he said, "Hey, aren't you Jerry Seabolt?" And I said, "I am." Now, I was a little cocky back then. Imagine that.
Wow.
And I said, "So who are you?" And he said, "I'm Rory Burke. I'm the products manager for Smash Records. I need you to come to work for me." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I need a national promotion director." That was my job interview in the lobby of the State Lake Theater. And he said, "Are you going uptown?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be taking a cab. You want to share?" And he said, "Could I?" So we rode up to the cab, and I said, "So what do you want me to do next?" And he said, "Well, I need you to come by the office." And I said, "Which office?" He said, "The corporate office." And I went, "I don't even know where the corporate office is." And he had to give me the address, and I was literally working out of the branch, which was on the south side of Chicago, because that's where all the action was.
Oh,
and
sure.
had never been to the corporate office. And 2 days later, I was the national promotion director for Smash Records.
Yeah.
And Roger Miller was one of my acts. And the Trogs,
Oh, yeah.
the Wild Thing was one of my acts. And we signed, oh, you're from Memphis, of course, this is a very familiar guy to you. A guy named Ray Brown walked in the office and said, "Hi, I'm Jerry Lee Lewis's manager. I think we ought to cut him country." And
Yeah.
we went, "I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but okay."
Now, what year was that, Jerry? What year?
That would have been 67, I think.
Okay.
Right, if it would have been right at 67, okay, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So the next thing I know, I was flying on Eastern Airlines to Nashville, Tennessee, to oversee. I don't want to say I was producing him. but I got to meet with Jerry Kennedy, who was the producer for their country division.
Right.
And we cut Jerry Lee Lewis and they put the record out. And next thing we know, like, we're sitting in a products meeting. We used to have meetings every Monday to talk about the 3 different labels, the 4 different labels. And the Mercury guys had all the country stuff, except for Jerry Lee Lewis. we somehow, because he was considered a pop act at that time.
Sure.
And they would sit there and they would talk about, yeah, our new Roy Drusky's up to about 10,000. And our new Dave Dudley is, he's got a hit, man. This time it's up to 32,000 sales.
Yeah.
How are you guys over at Smash doing with Jerry Lee Lewis? Well, we're at 250,000. That was a lot of records, man. Yeah. And then it went gold, and they were over there going, yeah, the Dave Dudley's up to 50,000. And how's Lewis doing? We're at 1 million.
Now, let me ask you something, because Jerry had this wonderful rock and roll career down here at Sun Records, and then he had his troubles, and then he took a little bit of a vacation or hiatus there for a little bit.
Well, most of the time he was over Europe, by the way, struggling to make a living. Making a living. I was on the road with Jerry Lee Lewis, and I got to tell you, you see and hear all the stories today about singers and acts, and none of this is considered insulting, in my opinion. I'm just telling a story. But how crazy people can get and all this stuff. You don't know crazy. You do not know crazy until you've been on the road with Jerry Lee and his sister Linda Gale, and their drummer, who was her first husband, and their fiddle player, who was her second husband, all in the same station wagon.
J.M. Van Eaton or something like that, was it? Is that his drummer?
I think so, if I remember. It's been a while. But one story, we were in Chicago playing down on Rush Street in a nightclub where it was a very strange setup. The audience sat on the first floor and the stage was on the second floor. And they had 2 different stages so that people could bounce back acts, the way it was set up.
Yeah.
And we were backstage, and Jerry, whose nickname is the Killer, was sitting in a chair, reared back with his legs crossed like a king. Mm-hmm. And this group of Chicago Bear football players were brought backstage to meet him because he was a star. Yeah. Some of them remembered him from when he was a rock and roll star. Some of them were country boys who knew Jerry Lee Lewis as a country star.
Yeah.
As a pop star, then a country star, sorry. And they were shaking hands with him, and he was almost close to letting them kiss the ring. And one of the wives they walked over and said, "Hi, they told me I need to meet you. You're somebody. I have no idea who you are, but I'll meet you to satisfy my husband." He leaned back and said, "Why don't you get the hell away from me, woman? And you can kiss some place of my body." And of course, now we have these guys who weigh in at 300 pounds in Jerry's band, which is standing here, all of whom are underfed.
Right.
And I'm standing, Cecil was his name, by the way.
Okay.
And I'm standing there, and back in those days, I weighed about 140 pounds soaking wet, brother. And Cecil leans over in my ear and says, "If you'll move 1 step to the right so I can get a clear shot." And I went, no.
You're ready to duke it out, huh?
Edge, barely, though. Those were the kind of days.
Oh, sure.
Or the time we were in Indianapolis, and it was about 2:00 in the morning, and my phone rings in my room. Back then, most motels were single story. And he said, "Hey, Jerry, this is Killer. You want to come down here for just a minute? I got something I need to show you." And I looked at my watch, and I'm thinking, this cannot be good. And I get up and I walk down the hallway. His door is standing open. It's just 2:00 in the morning in an inner city hotel. We've just come off stage. And Jerry Lee Lewis is laying there on his bed wearing we call them wife beaters, undershirt, and his boxer shorts. And he's taking dollar bills and throwing them in the air. And he goes, "Hey, baby, this is what rain looks like." And I went, 35 years later, I went, "Somebody made it rain." And I went, "Oh, I saw that already."
Oh, my gosh. So Jerry Lee was the originator of that phrase, it sounds like.
Yeah, it looks like that way. I was with him at the Chicago Theater, which was actually a theater up on, I can't think of the street, Oak Street. And he was opening for Johnny Cash. and this is a very, people have been telling this story for years, that Jerry, he opened for Johnny Cash. I was standing there in the wings watching him. He literally kicked the bench off the stage and took the piano and threw a fire on it and said, "Follow that, Hoss."
Yeah, that's a pretty infamous episode or scene, you know. That
Yeah, that was the kind of, that was the way it was. He was a very creative man, or he is a very creative man, I should say.
Yeah.
But he was also a fiery person, and his ego couldn't stand for him to be number two ever in anything he did.
Oh,
So
sure.
that was the kind of life that we lived, and that was we were there, you know. And when I talk to people today who are in the business, they don't seem to have that same feeling of that they're creating something that's going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm not proud for me, but I'm proud to have been part of an era where things were literally set in stone for what was going to follow. So that when people like Garth Brooks and people, Kenny Chesney, you just go through the list, Alan Jackson, they can go, "Hey, I grew up listening to Merle Haggard. I grew up listening to Jerry Lee Lewis. It's what set my style." And we didn't think anything about it, because back in those days, they were just people. They were my age. I was in my very, very early 20s and was literally being transformed from, Mark, I will tell you, I used to get up in the morning and I would go to work and I would stand there, and I'm from Scottsboro, Alabama, which is a little tiny town in northeast Alabama, only famous for one thing, and it's not something I choose to talk about, but it does have the lost luggage shop. So,
Well,
but I would go to work every morning and I would go, when are they going to find out that I need to be selling washing machines at Sears? Because it was just that this was like, and they would go, "Here, take more money, do, you know, and go and hang out all night," because that was the way the industry was. You know, if you were as good as your last hit, you were as good as the people you knew, and those people you knew were people that you met because we all had a commonality. We loved what we were doing. We loved the music. We literally lived for the music. If I wasn't in a bar someplace to listen to a live band, it was a lost night.
Yeah.
And that was your life, you know, and you didn't care, and everybody else was second class.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and really, and I'm sure, because like I said, you're right in the middle of all this. You're right in the mix of everything that's happening, going on. And like you said, everybody was very accessible, very, you know, they would chat with you, they talk with you, they treated you as an equal.
They dropped by. They were literally would drop by. Nobody had appointments.
Yeah.
You know, it was absolutely nothing. Like I said, you know, it was, I walked out of my office in the Mercury building, and there was Ferrati and Teicher sitting out there. And I went, "You guys look really familiar." He said, "Well, I'm Ferrati and he's Teicher."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and they were just they were young. They were young guys. They were probably their 30s at that time. You know, they were having a tremendous amount of success. They were classical pianists who had crossed the line into pop music.
Yeah.
And just people like that. Dave Clark for the Dave Clark Five would drop by the office. You know,
just you know, think about it now. Think about the technology that we have now, and the cell phones, and you know, the cameras, all that kind of stuff. And can you imagine just, you know, people walking in and you being able to record all this history around you? Of course, at that time, it's current events. You know.
Yes.
And you probably weren't thinking more than probably a year out in terms of, you know, the music business and all that. And then looking back on it 40, 50 years later, you know, it was a very, I'm sure everything was like a big blur almost.
Well, and there wasn't the competition between labels like there is now.
Sure.
Because there was so much money, and there was back in those days, radio stations didn't play top 40. Top 40 didn't come along to the early 70s,
okay,
or late 60s. And started in Ohio, by the way. I don't know what they have against us. A playlist might be 80 records long. So if I was going someplace to get a record played, let's say WCFL radio, which was WCFL and WLS were like major competitors, and maybe one of my competing promotion guys with one of the other labels would say, "Hey, you got a pretty good, with you and Rudner That was music director. You guys got a pretty good relationship. Would you get my what's your name, Bobby Gentry? Would you get my Bobby Gentry record played? I went, sure. So I carried the Ode to Billy Joe over to WCFL for the Capitol Records.
What a nice guy.
You know. So I lost a spot on his playlist, but it paid off later on. I had stuff that got played, and he just did things like that. There wasn't the cutthroat thing, because it was a business of gossip. If you didn't know the latest gossip, you were nothing. You were nobody. Right. So we all hung out together because we used to play a game called Liar's Poker, and there'd be 16 guys at lunch playing Liar's Poker with dollar bills.
Yeah.
And calling it work. And you might end up paying for your own lunch, but
it's almost kind of like it reminds me what you're talking about there is almost like an episode of Mad Men or something like that. I mean, just
a little bit,
what they were doing and all that.
Yeah, I think that if you look at that show, as a matter of fact, which was one of my favorite shows, a lot of that's based on that's the way business actually works, or worked back in those days. We've gotten really cut and dried with it now because of the pressure that we have and the stress that we have. But that was the way it was done back then. I mean, we didn't. I remember when a guy named Harry Carlson came to town to see me, and he had a little independent label called Fraternity Records out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And he put out a record with, I can't think of his name, but it was Then You Can Tell Me Goodbye. It was the record went number one. Yeah. And I broke it out of Chicago on WLS, and it was broke out of Cleveland and several other places. And he handed me a check, or handed me a $50 bill, and I went, "What's this for?" He says, "It's called a spiff." I said, "I don't know what that is." That's how naive I was. He said, "Well, it's a bonus. You just put it in your pocket. Forget about all this." And I went,
"Buy yourself something pretty.
Get yourself something, boy." So we didn't think about all those things. We were literally doing it because it was just a great way to make a living. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. That just now. Let me ask you this: What did your parents think about this young man being in the music business back then?
Well, before I moved out on my own, I had come in. I would be out on Friday and Saturday night doing the record hops with Art Roberts, who's now passed on. He's at that big radio station in the sky. And he would split he was the draw because he was the disc jockey and I was the record guy, but I would spin the records so he could do his microphone stuff. And I would be the judge we'd have a dance contest, and he would split the tape. He got $2 and I got $1 because he was the star. Yeah. But we'd have 150, 200 kids, and we'd do like 4 or 5 dances on a weekend. We'd do one Friday night and one Saturday afternoon, one Saturday night, one Sunday afternoon, one Sunday night. And then I'd go back to work on Monday morning, and I'd have all these dollar bills because teenagers don't usually have anything bigger than 5. And I kept them in a shoebox under my bed. I was still staying at home. I was still at home. And my dad worked the second shift. He got home at 11 o'clock at night, but he always got up in the morning to have coffee with the kids. I was old enough to get out and go to work every day, obviously, but I still had breakfast with my parents every morning. And I get up on a Monday morning. I had gotten in from Rensselaer, Indiana, which was 120 miles from Chicago. Long trip on a 2-lane road, by the way, and a Buick Special station wagon, by the way.
Oh, nice.
4-cylinder.
Yeah. Deep ride.
And I got up and walked in the kitchen, and my father, who was a very stern man, very, very man of very few words, was sitting at the head of the table, as was his place in the scheme of things. And my shoebox was sitting in front of him, and there were stacks of money.
Oh boy!
And I'm going, I don't know what. And he says, "Get your coffee, sit down. We'll go down to the police station and we'll work this out." And I went, "Stop." I said, "What do you mean go down to the police station?" He goes, "There's $9,000 here. You can't have earned that honestly." And I think my dad he probably made $125 a week, maybe, or 130, something like that. And which was big money back then. He was a union man.
Oh yeah.
And I said, "Dad, that's my money. I earned every penny of it." He goes, "Nobody makes this kind of money." I said, "Dad, I made $300 this weekend." And his mouth dropped. And he said, "What?" I said, "It's what I do for a living." He goes, you need a bank account. I went, I had to pay taxes on it.
Oh my gosh! So yeah,
I got a bank
$9,000.
account. I got a bank account and paid taxes on it, by the way. He wasn't going to have any of that.
You made sure you got clean there. Yeah, that's good.
I was saving money for a Bonneville Pontiac convertible,
Yeah,
which
that's
was
nice.
going to cost me $1,700 back then, by the way. So,
Oh my gosh, Jerry, that is that's just incredible. What I mean, yeah, other things that you were involved with at that time? Anything else? I mean, whether it was a person that you met, or you went to some concert, or just things that you saw during that time frame that we would look at now and just be just incredulous, just
oh gosh, it starts running together for one thing, because it was a continuous thing. Okay, I went to every concert in the Midwest that somebody was playing at. I carried the amps in because I had one of my acts, I can't think who it is right this second, was playing on a show with another group, and the group was called CTA, which stood for Chicago Transit Authority. Okay?
sure.
And then they became the Transit Authority, and then they didn't like that, so they became Chicago.
I think I've heard of those guys.
There were a bunch of guys in a station wagon with a U-Haul trailer for the first 5 or 6 years. Okay, it was
Wow. Yeah.
it was just the things like that. It was I mentioned Frank Sinatra. It was nothing for us to go to go to the Palmer House, which is a large 4-star hotel on Michigan Avenue.
Yeah.
Very old style, kind of like what's the one in downtown Memphis?
The Peabody.
Peabody. It's like the Peabody type hotel. But they had a room that they booked every major act in the world. It was nothing for this punk kid to be sitting tableside to see Xavier Cugat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And and him come over because I was the record guy, and people knew that. Now, no, I was famous, but within the industry, we knew each other.
Yeah.
And his crazy wife.
Charo.
Charo, yeah, Charo.
Yeah. Coochie.
Yeah. And just people like that. Or again, I'll go back to Herbie Mann, because I had the entire Herbie Mann collection at one time. And when he moved to Atlantic Records, he gave it to me. He said, "Here, I got the present for you. I got all my albums I've ever done."
Yeah.
And I think you have those albums, by the way.
Matter of fact, I do. I have them up in my at an undisclosed location. Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. But see, a lot of those are history. Okay. I came to Memphis because I mentioned Paul Bondura. Wayne Bondura got married in Memphis, Tennessee. He moved from Chicago, went to the Naval Air Station at
Millington.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
And called me up and said, "Hey, I'm getting married." And I said, "Great." He said, "I want you to come to the wedding." I said, "Where's that?" He said, "Graceland." I went, "Excuse me?"
What?
He said, "Graceland." I said, "How did you work this out?" He said, "It's his third cousin." And he asked her what she wanted, and she said, "I want to have the reception at your house." Nice. So here I am, end up at Graceland, and this guy walks into the jungle room, and says, "Hi, I'm Elvis Presley." I said, "Hi, I'm impressed."
Now, and what year would that have been?
Oh, geez.
Was that late 60s?
68, maybe.
Was it? Yeah, obviously before this comeback special, or before you changed.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was about the same time, right? That
might have been right. It was right in that area. I remember he had one of his buddies, and it was Red West, by the way, drove me to the train station in Memphis because I had to catch an 11 o'clock train back to Chicago. And I took the Illinois Central City of New Orleans.
Sure.
So Red West drove me to the train station.
Yeah, man, it's funny because I used to see. Matter of fact, probably 6 months before Red passed away, I saw him here at the Kroger in Germantown, and of course, and he was very, once he got through the Elvis phase, and once he left his employment with Elvis, I mean, he was, and of course, he did obviously a lot of acting, and with Robert Conrad, and was that Baba Black Sheep or whatever that TV show was like 40-something years ago.
He was in the what was the kids that were the movie where the
Oh yeah. It was the John Grisham. Was it The Client?
Yeah, he was in The Client. I'm thinking of the one Roadhouse. He was in Roadhouse also.
Yeah, he was in Roadhouse.
The hardware store, the auto parts guy. So.
Oh gosh. Well, now let me ask you this: because I'm thinking if there was a wedding that was going on, that probably was in the summertime, right? If 60.
It was. It was in the summer. It was actually late summer because it was hotter than the dickens. I'd never been to Memphis at that point in time, and because you know, I lived in Memphis for a while.
Yeah.
But it was another new experience for me. And back in those days, about the only thing on Highway 61 was Graceland. There wasn't anything down there then. Nobody discovered that you could build a museum about him because he didn't need a museum at that point.
Right. That's right.
So,
yeah, that's the thing. That is crazy. That is. Well, yeah, because I was thinking that that comeback special was called something like the Singer Sewing Machine, something kind of special, and
yeah.
but they said I believe they taped it in the summertime, and that's when they were talking about he was wearing that leather suit, in the 68.
Yeah, the black leather. That's one of my favorite specials. I remember.
They showed it around Christmas time or in December, but no, that's really cool. See, I had not heard that story from you before. So
stuff crosses all the time. It's when you're in an industry like that, it's nothing to run into things. At some other time we'll talk about some of the other things that happen, but
sure.
That's the way things, as I said initially, happenstance is just, if you put yourself out there all the time, you're going to cross paths with people all the time. It was nothing to be in Chicago, Illinois, growing up, to have all these blues acts. I mentioned the WVON radio. They would have the disc jockeys would all gather every Thursday night at a nightclub down on what's now South Parkway, which is down in the they call it the ghetto. Okay, it's on the south side. And I would go down there because back in those days, if you wanted records played on the radio, sometimes you would have to swipe the palms, so to speak. So I would go down there, and then I'd have to go. I had an act called his name was Tommy Tucker. Had a record out called the High Heel Sneakers.
I remember.
It was the only hit he ever had. And I had to go to. He was playing at the Alcyon. No, that's something. It was on South Park, 79th and South Park.
Okay.
And he was on the show with the Motown Review. And so here I am down there, and I'm with Martha and the Vandellas, who I later ended up on our label. Martha and the Vandellas, very well smart. Two ladies called the Soul Sisters. They weighed 300 pounds apiece and sang like angels, and they were on Sue Records.
Oh, okay.
And we got to be buddies. And Rodney Jones was the program director and said, "When y'all get off, I'm having a party at my house." Okay. So he said, "Hey, Seabolt, make sure you bring them and you come on too." And I said, "You got it."
Yeah.
Because see, back in those days, we didn't know about racial stress and strife. Sure. We were just a bunch of people that looked like a rainbow making a living. And when you tell people, yeah, I was down on south side of Chicago, which is now a war zone. And it was me and all these black disc jockeys and all these soul artists. And we were all there because we didn't look at each other we looked at each other. We were all in our 20s making money.
Absolutely. Everybody was happy. It was
loving the music. Loving the music.
Very similar to the Stax scene down here in Memphis, but
exactly.
Jerry, it looks like we're just about at that time right now for this first episode and all. And would love to have you come back here, the next week or two, and we'll talk a little bit further about the next chapter in your music.
That would be when I moved into the sunny South and became a country music promotion man.
I like your teaser. That was a good teaser right there, Jerry. So, all right, man. Well, we'll talk to you later. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Take care. See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.